Welcome to VintageDrumsTalk.com. Jim Messina here once again, and you've reached the live interviews page. We've had a lot of fun on this page interviewing top collectors. And one of them you've heard of before is Mark Whitey Cooper, my good friend. How's it going, Mark?
Good. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing just fine. I've been having a great time interviewing everybody. How you been since we last talked?
I've been doing great. I've been real busy and been having a lot of fun.
I can see you've been real busy. And look, here's how busy Mark's been. I've got a copy of this latest issue of the Modern Drummer magazine right here. It's the December issue with Neil Peart on the front. But Mark has a new article in there, and I want you all to go out and check this out because it's a very interesting article about the leady knob tension drum concept. Mark, let's get right into it. Why don't you explain these rather odd but highly collectible drums?
I'd be happy to. The knob tension drums were a radical change in design from the standard drum sets of the 1940s and 1950s. And right after World War II, people were clamoring for new ideas and new inventions and things to make life easier, and futuristic things were becoming in vogue. And so the people at Leedy and Ludwig Drum Company came up with this crazy-looking drum set called the New Knob Tension Drums. And what they were standard drum shells, but you could tune them by turning knobs on the outside of the shell.
Now, I have a picture of that up right now. Now, all you guys out there, if you've never seen a set of these, Mark's not kidding. They're really a strange-looking set of drum. They sort of remind me of the old Arbiter concept in just the way they look, but
they look more like flying saucers than drums,
do.
Actually.
Yeah. When I first saw these, I said, what is this? Just chrome bands around the top, and I couldn't figure out how to tune them. But explain this concept.
Well, what it is, there's a series of knobs that are attached that run through the outside of the shell, and when you turn a certain knob, it'll push up against. There's these metal. They're called toggle links, and as you turn these knobs, it applies pressure to a ring directly under the top and bottom head, and the more you turn the knob, the tighter it gets. And these are the design of these drums, as interesting as they look. It was a very poor design.
Really?
And they didn't last long. The parts broke easily. And the main problem was with the snare drums. Most people would like to get a relatively tight top and bottom snare drum head, and what would happen is the more you crank those knobs, the inner workings would start to pull away from the wooden reinforcing rings, and things would start to crack and break, and they were a nightmare to change heads. And I can imagine being at a nightclub or something back then and having to change a head that just broke because calfskin heads often broke. You have to unscrew a whole series of little tiny knobs, pull these big fat chrome rings off that are stuck on it really tight. Take the head off when you finally get all that stuff, and most likely you'd drop one of those screws and it would roll under the piano or something.
Now, I do know a little bit about these. I mean, believe it or not, I have one, but I never knew that much about it. But I did research a little bit, and from what I understand, and I'm not quite clear about this, that it was a real flop for Leedy and Ludwig, wasn't it?
It was. They introduced this design in 1950. And by 1953, they phased them out. And
that's pretty quick for a new design like that. Now, wasn't this George Way's dream or his whole idea?
Well, it was. George Way was a design engineer. He was kind of a jack of all trades at Leedy and Ludwig. He had worked for Leedy previously, and
now,
for Slingerland and most of the companies he had some part in it. Over his history, and this was kind of his baby. And when it failed miserably, I'm sure it didn't bode too well for him. And it's also possibly kind of telling that the company went out of business pretty much the following year. So by 1955, the company was no more.
So this was really the tail end kind of for George Way. I mean, he was with just about every company, wasn't he? That name is strewn all through vintage drum history.
Back in the, I think he was with Slingerland in the late or the early 40s. I'm sorry. No. So once again, I made a mistake. He was there like around 1946, 47, 48, and he'd been with Leedy for many years, going back into the 1930s.
Now, isn't that something? Someone like George Way, who had everything to do with Camco and the whole design of the turret lug and all that kind of thing, and his whole association with Leedy, to go out with an idea like this.
Well, you know, you mentioned the Camco drums, which if people aren't familiar with, they're the drums that have the round lugs.
Well,
that
just
look identical to the modern day DW drums.
Yeah.
Well, looking at these knob tension drums, it makes you wonder: did he get inspiration? Did he draw inspiration from the look of the round, big fat round knobs?
It's interesting you should say that, to compare something on this particular concept, the knob tension look, with something from the past. I would actually equate the idea of the tuning system to the earlier WFL wartime concept.
Well, as far as functionality, yeah. But I was referring more to the look. When you look at
the round lug,
the big round lug. I wonder if that inspired him to come up with that round lug design, which really had never been used ever before.
It was really a departure from the standard, vertical presentation that most companies were using after the tube lug, but
exactly. That's what I was
innovative,
getting at.
Yeah. Now, the pictures that you sent me, and most of the knob tension drums that I've seen are usually white marine pearl.
Yeah, but they did. That was the most common. I've never actually encountered any other than white marine pearl, but I do know that they made them in black diamond pearl. I know a couple guys that have black diamond pearl versions of that. And I've seen photographs of sparkle finishes as well.
Now, you mentioned in your article, you mentioned about the Sonny Greer set. That was basically a custom job, wasn't it?
Yes, that was definitely a custom job. He was an endorser for Leedy and Ludwig, so, I mean, he could have pretty much gotten any finish he wanted. Corduroy.
corduroy finish. Yeah. Now, I actually saw pictures of that.
What, corduroy pearl?
No. The Sonny Greer set, I think Steve Maxwell had that on display.
I think so. I think it's been in the Smithsonian, if I'm not mistaken, at times. It's a famous kit.
I think there's pictures in the Rob Cook's the Leedy book. I know I've seen that the SG design, right. But I'm surprised that Sonny Greer actually played a set of knob tensions. I wonder if we were able to ask him what he thought of them, if he thought these are great, or if he was one of the ones who found out that these are just breaking down on me.
Yeah, I would imagine that pretty soon the people at Leedy and Ludwig would have heard from Sonny Greer.
Yeah.
On how well the drums were working. Now they were, understandably they were all excited about it. I've seen there's a photo somewhere of George Way holding a drum at the Leedy and Ludwig factory, and there's a couple drummers standing around looking at it, admiring the drum, and I think there's a guy testing it out, and they're all excited over this new product, which, I mean, they must have, it was such a radical departure in design, it must have been exciting to see something like that, but the excitement probably wore off pretty quickly after they realized what these drums were really about.
People probably started sending them back.
I talked to a guy in Canada a year or so ago, and he ran a music store up there, and he said this old drummer would come in and hang around and talk to him, and he was telling him a story that he had back in 1950 or 51 he had purchased a brand new knob tension kit, and he was all excited about it when it arrived, and all the other drummers in town were really envious of his new fancy-looking knob tension drums, and the guy said that within a couple of months they were just falling to pieces, and he was very disappointed in this knob tension drum set that he bought.
So much for testing in the factory, you know. I'm really
I don't
surprised.
think they did any testing, and
They must
I would
not.
imagine the expense that they had to go through to come up with a whole different design like this. It really must have been a big disappointment
Well, I'll tell you, the ones that I've seen, including the snare that I have in my collection, things are wrong with it. The strainer and just, you know, it's rickety. But I'm noticing that the photos that you actually have in the Modern Drummer article, this whole set is astonishing to me. The condition that this set is, and to see the double floor toms like this. Let me ask you about that particular set. What's the story behind that?
It's kind of interesting to make that, to restore that set to the condition where you're seeing it in the photographs. I had to use. It took 3 almost complete drum sets to make one.
Wow. Okay.
Because there were so many broken parts and replacement parts are non-existent for those drums. So there were, you know,
yeah,
there was a bass drum that was totally gone, but it had some usable parts. A couple of tom-toms that needed major repairs, and unless you're a machinist, repairing the things that break inside these drums is not easy. And I had to makeshift a couple things on one of the drums.
Have you ever seen a set that's virtually untouched that is without any flaws?
Not yet.
Every one that I've seen is just something major is wrong with them. But
yeah.
The way you've brought this set back to just a pristine quality, it really looks great in this picture.
It was the most difficult restoration job I've ever done in 30 years of doing.
Well, because it's not standard drum technology. That's
right.
the thing.
Right.
It's like we all know how to, you know, mess with tube lugs and mess with, you know, inserts and all that kind of stuff. But this is just from Mars. Not really, though. I mean, getting back to what I was saying earlier, the comparison to this technology, meaning tuning from the shell, whether you're turning a knob or whether you're using a drum key to put it onto a drum key head, such as the WFL design, the wartime drums that WFL was putting out. Very similar.
The attempt of designers to come up with a drum that you could tune from the outside without a drum key goes back even further, back into the late 30s. There's a company called L&S back then.
Leedy and Stroop.
Yes.
Yes.
And
okay.
It's been. I think they're actually Leedy and Sons.
All right.
They're also called Leedy and Stroop. I'm a little confusion over that. That's something Harry Kangany could certainly expound upon. But they had something called the Master Tension drums, and they were really complicated. They had cables running inside the drums, and you would insert a key in the outside of the shell, and when you turned the key, it would, from what I remember, it would pull these different cables and create tension or release tension on the top and bottom heads.
Now, interesting the way
very rare drums. Yeah. I've never seen one in person.
I've seen articles on them, but it amazes me the concept, like you say, of tuning from the side instead of from the top. And I actually thought there were really only the two, the WFL and this attempt in the 50s.
Right. Well, the Cecil Stroop was an engineer for that company, but he worked later for Ludwig, and I think WFL.
Uh-huh.
And I think it was his idea again. The drums you're referring to, the World War II drums that made by WFL.
Yeah. That
was sort of a necessity. They had to come up with some kind of way to eliminate the amount of metal parts because of the
10% law. That's right, the 10% law. Now, I have a picture of that you sent me right here with the sliding slats, the bowed slats, but it's the same idea about
Yeah,
pressure on the top from the inside, pressure on the bottom from the inside.
exactly. It's just different ways of coming up with that design.
Now, the only difference I actually see about that concept is with the WFL, it's simultaneous. You turn the side with the drum key. On the knob tension, you can do the top or the bottom separately. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
One knob for the knob tension drums has a little bump on it, so I guess you could tell in the dark which one is for the bottom head and which one's for the top head.
In fact, I can see that in your picture here. Guys, if you look at the first picture, the top picture of the article in Modern Drummer, you can see the little nub that Mark is talking about, and then the next knurled knob is nice, smooth chrome. So yeah, you could do that by feel, and you can also see in the picture that the thick chrome hoops are held on just by smaller knurled knobs. And that's their only function, just to hold that rim in place.
And those hoops are as beautiful as they are, and they really are pretty. Give the drums a really unique look. They're razor sharp on the edge that goes over the head and over the drum. And I noticed a lot of these drums, the pearl is all chewed up and split up near the bearing edge, and that's from that. It's such a close, tight fit with that razor sharp edge that it's a nightmare putting the heads back on. As much fun as it is taking them off, it's even more of an adventure putting them back on.
No, I gotta
ask. Then you
you.
have to line up all the little knobs that hold that rim to the shell.
I have never messed with mine. I bought
Don't
it at
do
the
it.
Chicago. Yeah, I bought it. It was one of the first things that was purchased for me at the Chicago Drum Show years and years ago. I couldn't attend, and my twin brother went for me, and he would call me on the phone. Well, there's some wacky thing. I told him, look for a knob tension. He found it, bought it for me. I can't believe he did that for me. But
I wish I had a brother like that.
He's great. But really, I haven't touched it. I brought it home. Bottom head is split. Looked at it, would just, kind of curiously look around it, but I never took it apart. It's just... It's too weird. It's not conventional. No,
I say don't do it, but you have to do it just to learn about them and plus you want to change that head. You can't. I'd be very disappointed if you didn't change that head. Now, all the negative things we both have just said about the knob tension drums, I have to say that they sound fantastic.
I was just getting ready to ask you, have you ever sat down behind this particular set that you have that you redid, that's in the Modern Drummer magazine? How do they sound?
Not this particular set, but I had one a few years ago, and I took it out to a band gig, and it was with a rock band.
Wow.
And I knew better than trying to use the snare drum, so I used a regular White Marine Pearl leading Ludwig Broadway snare drum, because I knew I was going to be banging pretty hard, and I didn't want to have to. I knew I wouldn't get much. I like a nice tight snare drum head, and I wasn't going to get that.
So how did the toms and the kick sound?
Fantastic. They sound like they look. Big, fat, warm, punchy sound.
Similar to maybe a Radio King sound?
Even a little bit more punchier and fatter.
Really?
At least, in that, I only used them for one or two nights, and then I thought I better stop doing this. But
well,
in that particular venue I used them at, they sounded wonderful, and there were lots of sustain. The bass drum had it was a 22.
Yeah.
14 by 22. It had a beautiful punch to it, and again, I was with a rock and roll band.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a risk going out to do a whole night like that.
I had to ask, really, that was a risk. I mean, some of these drum sets you shouldn't take out. Some of this vintage stuff, Bunny Carlos has been known to say, "Hey, I don't play anything, past before 1930, because if you break a set or." Same with me.
I could never help myself. I played in a band for 30 years, over 30 years, and I was collecting vintage drums all that time. So it would kill me not to try these drums out.
Well, you know,
'cause I play 3 or 4 nights a week. It's like I have to try this set. I have to try that one.
I would be tempted to do so myself if I had a whole set of these really weird-looking drums. They're the Lydian Ludwig knob tension set, and I'll tell you, Mark is kind of an expert on these things. He's had to work with a whole set like this is pretty amazing. But wait till you see what he's got next for us. We're going to be talking about a Sea Green Radio King set. It's a 1936 set, and it's Mark's dream set. And in the next segment, we're going to get back to that. Mark, you're going to tell us all about it, aren't you?
I certainly will.
We'll be right back, drum collectors. We'll see you in just a bit. Mark Whitey Cooper and the Lydian Ludwig knob tension drum set. Check out his article in Modern Drummer magazine, the December issue. Here it is right here on the newsstands right now.